All right, guys, we're back with W2, Mr. Walter Wofford himself. I just gave you that nickname right now, Walter.
Great. That's a good one.
I know you're going to like that. Now, we
Like
had
W squared.
we had another podcast on small dollar IRAs. Guys, as you know, Walter Wofford, one of the nation's most successful real estate investors, a good friend and mentor of mine. And he's going to share a lot on today's podcast about land trusts. This is a very important tool to utilize in your business, a lot of different benefits for it. A lot of investors know they should be using it, but they don't use them. Walter, why do you think that is? And kind of let's dig into land trusts.
Well, a couple of reasons. One is it's hard to borrow money through an institution if you're taking title in a land trust. And the reason is that the trustee is not personally liable and the beneficiary is not personally liable. So a banker can't get their hands around the neck of anybody.
Right. So you can't just go down to Bank of America and buy a house and get a loan on a land trust.
Yeah, but the private lenders often are okay with it. And of course, you can buy one subject to a house that has financing already with it, or you can do joint ventures with land trust co-owning. It just bypassed the bank. I don't think you want to be in the bank's world anyway.
Is there a way to get a traditional bank loan and then roll it into a land trust after you close on that? Or is there a strategy to do that?
We're frozen.
No, it's good to go. Some may glitch from your side, but we're good to go.
Okay, good. All right, so I didn't hear that last thing because it had a pause, but I
was saying that if they go to the bank, get a loan, let's say the traditional process, after they close on it, because the bank won't give them a loan to a land trust on the front side, is there a way after they close on it to roll that into a land trust?
Yeah, you can do that, but the problem is that you're already in the chain of title. So if somebody wants to come and look at that, then that's a problem. So, Connor, here's the thing. You don't have to wait until something bad happens before you get interested in this. As a matter of fact, that's too late anyway. I had back in the 90s, I'd known about land trusts for 20 years, 15 years. Been to a bunch of seminars on them, but I was still borrowing from the bank and taking, putting it in my name, my personal name. Had about 50 houses in my personal name at that time, and I had a dog bite suit on a house that I didn't own when I got sued. Had no knowledge of the dog, gave no permission, and what happened was the meter reader was coming to cut the gas off, and the tenant sicked their big dog on them and gnawed on him. And then next thing I know, I'm getting sued for $50,000. Well, it stayed in the court system for 5 years. And finally, they said, the judge said, you got to settle this thing, which my insurance company did settle it. Basically, I lost. And, but tort reform came during those 5 years in Mississippi. So they were only awarded 3 times actual damages. The medical bills were $1,200. So they got $3,600, and I'm sure the attorney got $15,000 for that. But had that judgment attached $1,000, it would have attached to every house that I owned in my personal name. Kind of scary, isn't it?
Well, it works in weird ways, and that's what people don't understand is that, like you said, they need to prepare and anticipate the future negative things that can happen to them. It's not good to be negative, but you have to be aware that this happens, and asset protection is very important. So let's talk about a land trust in general. We kind of touched on this before in other podcasts, but kind of break down high-level view of what a land trust is. Then we'll kind of dig into some of the biggest reasons why you and other investors are sophisticated are using the land trust.
Well, I don't like telling people what I got. Do you? If those listening to this, if you like telling people what you got, stop it. Don't tell people what you got. No, this isn't a bragging time.
If they know you have it, they'll try to take it.
Well, land trusts have been around for a long, long time. Matter of fact, they've been around longer than corporations and LLCs. And they date back to Roman times and certainly back to Henry VIII's time. They've been around. So basically what it says is a person gives an asset to somebody else to watch until they want it back. Going off to war, you can see how that would have been important. The family farm, if you're going off to war, wouldn't you want somebody to have the title while you're off to war? And that's how they came about. But they've been popular in the Chicago area for many, many years. and to me, it's a operating system. And Jack Shea down in Florida was the first one that told me that it is an operating system. It's different than owning real estate in another manner. I'll give you an example. Where do people learn how to take title as a real estate investor? Where would they go? Well, they could go to their closing attorney, and he'd probably sell them, prepare an LLC. And that's fine. You can do that, and banks can work through that from a lending perspective. The problem is that that's not the only way to own stuff. It's just the next level of education is owning them in a trust. Now, if you wanted your LLC to be the beneficiary of that trust, that's fine. But you won't be able to separate your assets in an LLC unless you form a new LLC each time you buy a house. And in some state, that's prohibited. Mississippi is not. It costs $50 one time to file an LLC. So if you want to take the time to learn about land trust, the fallback position would be just forming a different LLC for each property you buy.
Right. So don't take 20 properties and put them in one LLC. Separate them or put them in individual land trusts. Now, kind of break down the structure of what a land trust looks like and break down the different.
All right. So it's a piece of paper. It's a contract. It's a contract. You got to have a trustee, and that's a fiduciary relationship to the beneficiary. So in most land trusts, the creator, the grantor of the trust is also the beneficiary, or one of them. You could have one person who creates it and have multiple beneficiaries, but it would be one of the grantors. So that's how it's done. So it's a contract that acts like an entity. So you can take title in a trust, no problem. You can do it in all 50 states. No problem whatsoever. You just can't go to the bank and borrow money with the entity as a trust. But you would want to create a separate trust, and it takes about 5 minutes for each property that you buy. Okay? So you got to have a trustee who signs after you give written direction from the beneficiary. So the big question is, who has the power of direction? And let me show you the difference between how this trust works and let's just say living trust. My parents they put their house and their bank accounts and their cars in this living trust, and they were the co-trustees, right? The beneficiaries were the 4 kids in the family, me being one of them, and the power of direction rested with the trustees who set it up. Okay, they were the grantors and the trustees and not the beneficiaries. Got it? So a land trust is a little different because the power of direction comes from the beneficiaries to the direction to go sign this deed, go borrow this money, go rent this house. That's how that works. And so the grantor and the beneficiaries are the same, and the trustee takes marching orders from the beneficiaries. Now, it is possible to move that power of direction around if you had a reason to, but that's how most land trusts operate.
Okay, so let's look at like the lineage of how it would go from you're an investor, you want to buy a property, you have to create the trust ahead of time. Is that kind of how it works?
Sure. Well, you got to have something to convey into. So the first thing is create the trust. And that's normally not recorded. What is recorded is a memorandum of trust that basically tells the basic information about the trust to give the world evidence that it exists, but it doesn't disclose who the beneficiary is. Okay, and that's true in most states. And so when you file a deed that comes into the Acorn Trust, and then you file your memorandum of trust, it tells who the trustee is, but it doesn't tell anything else. And so who owns that thing? Well, the legal and equitable title owner is the trustee for the benefit of the beneficiaries. Okay? You got it? So the beneficiaries, it's kind of like this. You got a pontoon boat, right? No, you don't want a pontoon boat. You want your neighbor to have the pontoon boat, right? You just want to use the pontoon boat. So you let your neighbor own it and you get to use it. That's the idea. The trustee owns it. You get all the benefits.
Okay, so is it a good strategy to create them kind of as you're doing the business going one by one, or do you go down and create a bunch of them up front and kind of because you know you're going to be buying other properties, and how do you go about naming?
Well, you don't typically do that because you don't know which properties you're going to acquire. If you did 20 of them, you need to have a legal description in there.
Okay.
That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is just fund it with the asset is some dollar amount. That dollar amount can later on and take title. So I've seen it done both ways. Most of the time you create them as you're buying the property. Now, you know what? The closing attorney doesn't care about seeing the trust. They don't ever ask for that. And not only that, they say, go file your memorandum of trust. I'm not going to prepare it for you. So basically, you can get one closed where it just be the Acorn Trust and here's the address without even mentioning the name of the trustee. I think that's pretty good.
And you're pulling your own title on these. How does that kind of work? And then I guess a lot of people also have confusion over who's going to sign the paperwork, who goes as trustee or the beneficiary, who's actually signed the contract. And that's where I think a lot of people get kind of confused in the step by step.
Well, you gotta have a trustee that you trust, right? So we're not talking about IRAs now. We're talking about a fiduciary relationship, a trustee. So you get somebody that's willing to sign some docs. Now, in most states, statutorily, they don't have any personal liability. Okay, so unless they're doing fraud or misconduct, they don't have any liability. So that's a very important thing to know, that the trustee shows up for the closing. He's been giving a letter of direction that says sign these documents on behalf of the beneficiaries. And so what that means is you don't have to go to closing.
Right, save some time. Okay, now picking your trustee, they have professional trustees out there, but also like, what, as your perspective, do you want this to be a partner, family member, close friend, professional attorney? How are you going to go about deciding who you want your trustee to be?
Well, you know, I have heard this comment from many, many people, and they say, I can't choose one because I don't trust anybody. You know, they hadn't developed any trust. Most of the trustees come from being in an event, learning together. And in my events that we do, I say, all right, turn around and find somebody that you'll be a trustee for, and they can be reciprocal. There's no problem with that. The problem is when you involve your IRA, then you have different relationships. But if you're not involved in your IRA, that's a good way to do it.
Now, what happens if I have you become my trustee and I can't find you and you disappear off the planet?
You can fire me. You can replace me. It's in the trust documents.
Okay.
And that happens. That does happen. So you might want to have 2 trustees or 3, that any of these can act.
Okay, that's interesting. And this can be done, I mean, that's the way to get around that right there. But like, let's say you can fire them and replace them. How is this a quick turnover, something that can be done right away? Because sometimes you're up and
Everything about trust can be done right away.
Okay, great. Because that's where a lot of people have the risk of losing a deal. It's at the compression point right around closing, and you can't get the docs signed, and now you're in a panic. Now, what happens?
Dot loop, and DocuSign, all those. Now, remember, most of what the trustee does, like writing a contract, signing a contract, that's a dot loop thing. That's electronic signature. We made over this past 3 days, I've made 50 offers, MLS offers, and the trustee DocuSigned every one of them. Okay, you got it. Now, that's how we do it. I mean, that's how you do things quickly with DocuSign. They don't need to be notarized, but you know, it's coming that you're going to have an electronic notary soon. Do you know that? Some states have already passed that.
Nice. What if you're my trustee and I don't make my payments, or the property's not performing? What liability do you carry, or if any? Or where does the liability fall? So like potential
Well, the
loss.
trustee, all the management functions of a land trust is held within the beneficiaries. The collecting of the rents, paying the taxes, paying the insurance, all that falls within They're the trustees. That's not, see, in a lot of trusts, the trustee does everything without direction. Like a bank trustee, for example, if you go to the trust department, they're going to do all they can to make the best judgment calls for the beneficiaries. That's not how this works. It's just the opposite.
Right. So, because if you're out there right now and you have a friend that's an investor and you're an investor, they're probably thinking, what's my risk? What's my liability to be the trustee? What's my time obligation? And so if they're going to scratch each other's backs. Now, is that possible that you can be a trustee of someone else's trust and then vice versa?
Sure. No problem. No problem whatsoever with that. Unless you're dealing with IRAs, and then that's a whole nother set of decisions you got to make.
Okay, now what happens, because one of the biggest reasons that you would use a land trust is asset protection. Is there any way that you can be forced legally, or the trustee can be forced legally? Like, let's say what happens is a tenant gets bit by a dog and they're trying to force something as far as legality measure. What would be the process behind the scenes of that? The trustee gets called into small.
Well, here's the thing. So if somebody can get the trustee into court, then they're going to spill the beans. The judge will compel him to do that, even though the trust agreement says that he cannot tell who the beneficiary is. And so the judge would have to make a call that negates a contract. See, but the beauty of this, I mean, if something bad happens with a trust-owned property, they're going to court. They're going to get you to court. But the most you can lose is that asset. Now, that's kind of important. And if there's any debt that's on that property, then if somebody gets awarded a judgment, they've got to deal with the debt that's on the property first, right? So the debt doesn't go away just because you lose a lawsuit and they put a judgment on there. So here's what happens. I had a friend of mine who's a closing attorney for many years and an elder law attorney. And we're having coffee just a week or so ago. And he told me a story about he helped somebody put their land in a land trust years ago. And through a series of events, one of the beneficiaries allowed somebody to go hunting on the land and fell out of the tree. And now the guy that got hurt wants to sue the trust. And so they call this, this attorney, one call, that's all. You got those signs out there in Dallas, one call, that's all. You know who I'm talking about?
There's always one in every city. Usually a couple of those guys.
Yeah, they're not very creative. They're one call, that's all. But when that guy in our town found out that it was owned by a trust, he said, we're not going after it. It's like trying to get your hands around a bowl of Jell-O. It's hard. You don't know what doesn't happen because somebody don't want to take on the trust. So you can change beneficiaries just like that. You can change trustees just like that. And it doesn't need to be recorded necessarily. Trustee, probably, yes. Changing the beneficial interest of the trust, I could do one from 5 minutes from right now. We can change it, and you don't have to record it. So I could convey to you right now my interest in that property.
So what happens in a situation like that? Because I know some people are like, oh my gosh, well, if it's not recorded, there's no public record of it. What happens if the paperwork's lost? How could
you can always recreate the paperwork. I mean, all that's amendable. You can make amendments. As long as you're alive, you can make amendments if you got the right to make them.
And what about liens and judgments? Can they attach these to property like contractor's lien, basic? Because I know a lot of people.
Well, think about this. The land trust is a newly created entity. It never has existed before. So it would not have any prior judgments that would attach. Even if the trustee has personal judgments against him, the trustee in his capacity as trustee is a separate entity. So no personal judgments the trustee can attach to that property. And likewise, beneficiaries. If you had judgments, since it's a newly created entity, your personal judgments would not attach to that house. And that's the reason we encourage our homeowners that we sell to in the helping tenants become homeowners. And I explained the benefits just like this. Would you like to protect your title from for you to be able to sell it sometime in the future? And then I'd ask them, you know what a judgment is? And all of them know what a hospital lien is, right? All of them know that. And so if I put it in their name, Janice Jones personally, and Janice Jones had a judgment or more, they would all attach to the property. And before she could sell it or borrow money, she'd have to deal with that judgment. Not so if you put it in the Janice Jones Family Trust. Her personal judgments will not attach to that.
Right.
That's a big benefit.
Big benefit. So do you think that everybody should be putting every property in trust and then they just sell the trust, essentially?
Well, I kind of get in arguments with my wife for statements like always and ever and never, those kind of things. I think it's good to do as a policy to do it that way, to sell. So a lot of people do this, and I don't really agree with this, to where they get the homeowner to assign their interest to a trust named after the homeowner, and then they would be the beneficiary and then assign the beneficial interest as a way of getting around the due on sale clause. I don't think that's good business personally. Have I done it? Yeah, I've done it. I don't think I'm going to do it again. But it's just not, it's not good business. You're trying to work around that paragraph 18 or 17 that says, you know, if any or all, any part of the property is sold or transferred without the lender's prior written consent, then they got the right to accelerate the loan, meaning pay it all now. And if you don't pay it all now, then they have the right to foreclose on it. That's just an attempt at a workaround to get around that due on sale clause. And I'd much rather just go to the lender and say, look, you got two people paying you now, not one. And I never have had a problem with that.
What about if it comes to like a probate situation? Is the trust willable? What would happen if someone's driving home and they get hit in a car wreck? How does that go? What if they have?
Well, let me ask you. You got an LLC?
Yeah.
You have one?
Yeah.
All right, so what happens if you die and you're the member? What happens to that LLC? Does it die too? No. Yeah, same thing's true with the trust. Same thing.
And then the trustee would, or like, let's say you had.
If the trustee dies, then you have a mechanism to replace them.
And this is going to get handled by a probate attorney.
Well, those are two different issues. You're changing the trustee that of the land trust is easy to do. It's just say, here's the old one, he's out, here's a new one in.
I was meaning like, let's say, you know, I have 5 kids and own a bunch of properties and they're all in these different land trusts. How would that look going forward? Because this is questions I get all the time is what happens if, you know, I disappear? Is it willable?
Oh yeah, it certainly is. Now the beneficial interest is a personal property interest. And so you don't, land trusts typically avoid probate. There's no reason to probate that trust, land trust. None at all.
One of the biggest benefits, probate proof.
Well, yeah, big benefit. Yeah.
What about, so you do, you know, we did a little 2-part series here with your talking about IRAs. How does that look? Can your IRA create a trust?
Certainly can do that. So let's just say you want to buy a piece of property and you buy it for $30,000, you got $30,000 in your IRA. So you would tell the closing attorney to the person, the entity that's going to receive title would be the IRA. Okay, Connor, FBO, trust company, and that would be the title on the deed. Well, I think, me personally, I don't like putting retirement account assets of public record. That really bothers me because now you've told the world that your IRA owns this asset, and if there was a lawsuit against that property and it could blow back into your IRA as well as all your other money in your IRA.
Right.
So you want to put up some roadblocks. And so this is done every day at Quest, is where you direct Quest to sign this trust document on behalf of you and the IRA owner and send the $30,000 to the closing attorney. So now you've got this newly formed entity, and the closing attorney would deed it into that trust. But it wouldn't have your name on the trust. It'd be the Acorn Trust or whatever you named it. It wouldn't be your name. You like that better?
I guess so. Quest IRA, run by Quincy Long, is the preferred IRA custodian that most investors I know use. So, what else? Are there any other benefits that I haven't probably brought up that you think would be good for them to?
Well, I like them because they're confusing. That's a benefit, and a lot of even attorneys who don't traffic in trust every day sometimes have a hard time with it. I've had in Mississippi in 1914, we changed to the Uniform Trust Code that was similar with 34 other states. They made it look almost identical for each of these states on how you deal with trust. And one of them had to do with recording the memorandum of trust, which gives the world evidence that you own it. And it said in this Uniform Trust Code that if you put the information that is required in a memorandum, put it in the acquiring deeds, you don't have to file one. Okay. I had to remind that every attorney that I dealt with since 2014, I said, go back and read this provision in the trust code, because they didn't read it. They didn't know about it. So they asked me to go do a memorandum of trust, and says, not necessary. Look, right there. So it's not something that attorneys spend a lot of time on, unless they're an elder law attorney or a family law. They spend a lot of time, but those are not the same type of trust. These are different kind of trust.
And a very powerful strategy, and one of the biggest hurdles I see a lot of investors avoid is learning the paperwork and learning the contract process, the step-by-step process. But you are having an event. Sometimes you're in Jackson.
Yeah, we will. We go over every document and make them fill it out. Fill it out. Yeah. We're going to create one right now. And once you do it one time, you realize that there's not much to it. It's really not. It's you. People look at it and say, "Oh, I can't do this," and they say, "Yeah, you can do this. Let's go read the trust code." It says about trust creation, and it's about 2 pages. And if you do this, you can create the trust. Well, how hard is that?
Right.
It's not.
Well, there's a lot of other people talking about land trust, but they don't teach you actually how to do it. They talk about the theory, the benefits of it, but they're not going to say, here's how you fill out the paperwork. Here's a step, one by one, and walk you through the process and give you the reason why you're doing what you're doing on each step. When is that event that you're doing?
That's a good question.
He's like, I'm doing an event. I am now.
I think, when is that? I don't know. Sometime middle part of the year, but go to walterwofford.com, WalterWofford.com, and scroll down to the bottom and you'll see what it is. Steve Zahala and I did one just about a month ago, and everybody loved it. They loved it because once you got the paperwork, now you really have a way to do things that with a trust that you could not normally do with an LLC. And there's many, many reasons, benefits in using trust, but you just got to say, I'm going to do it. So I put my foot down years ago that I said, I'm not going to acquire any real estate or any note without a trust, period. And it's been a pretty good policy for me. Now, I can't go borrow money at the bank. Well, I didn't want to do that anyway. I hadn't done that in 15 years. Don't intend on going back. You know why? Because they're going to make you fill out that financial statement and tell them what you got. And you like filling out those financial statements? Well, number one, you probably can't get it right. So here you are making mistakes with a federally insured loan, right? But the other thing is, I don't want to put myself in a position to tell anybody what I got.
Right. That's a big problem investors make, is they love to go out there and brag and say, look what I got. First of all, they're lying half the time. Second of all, why would you let everybody know what you own? Target.
Well, trust are good for, you got a boat, put the title in a trust. Okay. You got a car, put the title in a trust. You got guns, you got equipment. Why would you want to put it? Actually, this is a weird statement. I could honestly say to a judge, I don't own anything. I don't, because everything I have is in a trust, including the house that I'm sitting in right now. I'm the beneficiary of the trust.
Can you say that to a divorce attorney?
Well,
The joke was
now if they ask, do you have a beneficial interest in any trust? The answer would be yes. Got a bunch of those. But I don't. You got to get comfortable with not having to own something, and you control it. So the trustee typically is the owner for the benefit of the beneficiaries. It's kind of weird. It's a weird thing. When you get to the point that you're comfortable not having to own something, then the whole world opens up. I can control it without owning it. Just like in that last episode that we talked about a short-term rental deal that I did, that I became a long-term tenant from a person that's going through, let me just, to make an example of owning versus controlling. Okay. So I wanted to leave the title in this person's name of a house that I got the foreclosure caught up $10,000. And then I had, an option to buy it from this person anytime during the next 27 years. And I'm making the monthly payment of $1,100 on this house. I'm taking the money to the bank, right? So I'm making sure that it's being made, and I have an option to buy it. So I don't own the house. I just control everything about it. So it's on a short-term rental. We'll get $3,000 a month for it. My payment is $1,100 a month. And so when you take out utilities and costs and stuff like that, it'll be more than $1,000 a month. But I don't own it. Now that's an example of controlling without owning it. And so the same thing is true with a trust. The trustee owns it for your benefit. Now I did something. I want to tell you something that just as I had to think through this, because I'm 65 and the person I bought it from was about the same age. And in 27 years, we may not be the ones around to execute of the buying this house, right? Isn't that a real possibility? So I had to look at who would be her heirs. I knew my heirs could handle this because they're in the real estate business. But her heirs would be her two daughters, who have proven so far to be financially irresponsible. I know them. So what would happen if they had judgments? Okay. So mama dies, and I'm ready to execute. I want to get a deed from the heirs of mama. And these two girls have judgments. They can't deliver good title. You see that? And so I had to put a mechanism in there to make sure I could get good title. And so the option agreement was secured by a deed of trust or mortgage. So if they have judgments and they cannot deliver title, then I have the right to foreclose them out with that deed of trust and wipe out all those judgments, and I'd get the house. And that was a very easy thing to explain and to agree upon with this seller, because she knew full well that might happen. And so it didn't take anything. She doesn't want the house back. I just want to be able to close on it when I want to close on it.
Very powerful. So guys, go to walterwofford.com. Anything else you want to put on here? Send them to social media sites?
No, I need to learn about that, Connor.
You need to get your podcast going. You need to do small dollar IRA, land trust, creative financing podcast or something like that.
Just have a big pile of tools that you use in real estate. But it's not, it's all learnable, Connor, and you learn it from stories. Just like that story. Now you can go do exactly what I told you, and you'll think of a reason to do that. Controlling without owning it and getting all the benefits. See, in that last example, I capture amortization because my option says that I can buy it anytime for the current loan balance. All right, so it's going down over the next 27 years. It's waterfront property, and it will be worth more than what it is now, particularly when it's amortizing down. So if you compare owning versus that scenario, this is better than owning.
Right. I think also, like, if they come to your event and they see more case studies and they see the benefits and hear case studies of other individuals in the room that use this land trust strategy for certain other benefits in their own personal business, and then they learn how to do the paperwork, they're going to have the confidence to go out there and attempt to do these deals. I think what holds people back is they're getting a little tiny piece of information here and there, and they know they need to learn these things, but they just don't ever sit down. Kind of like you're saying, at one point you put your foot down and said, I'm going to learn this. Well, there's no other better place to go learn this than to go to your event.
And it's not just for owning property, it's for options, and it's also for private lending. So you could create a trust as the lender very easily. Nobody has to give you permission to do it. And while that would be important, let's just say that you're out there making loans and somebody wanted to compete with you. And so they could just do a general index search and find out all your customers of who you made loans to. Right? How hard would that be? Not. You can do that in your pajamas. So if you want to conduct a business that leaves a footprint all along the way of what you're doing, then keep using your LLC. But you could have just as easily created a different trust for every loan that you did, and it'd be very difficult to track that.
How do you organize behind the scenes once you start creating all these different trusts? Are you using Podio, certain platforms, certain CRM? Like, how do you keep track of all these and keep them organized? Well,
once you set them up, you don't really have to keep up with the title aspect of it anymore. You just got to keep up with the payments coming in and out. So there's a lot of things, QuickBooks will do that. But you don't. So once you've bought it in a trust and got all the documents and you're going to own that asset for a while, then you don't worry about it. Just stick it in the file. It's the management of the money that's the hard part. It's not the ownership. So I think a lot of people would put a living trust as beneficiary of a land trust at some point for the management aspect of it. Money in, money out. So I got 2 adult sons that are both in the real estate business, and we've had this discussion. Said, son number 1 over here, you're going to deal with all the notes, and son number 2 is going to deal with all the real estate, and they're going to get paid for that, even though they're one of 3 heirs. It's take their time away to manage that, and so an ideal way to do that would be create a living trust and have maybe 1 or 2 sons as co-trustees of that, as well as beneficiaries. So that's something that you think about when you get gray hair and lots of birthday candles.
It's a lot of good stuff. I think you hurt a lot of people's heads, but it's going to be good when they figure out, watching this over and over and over, to kind of let it sink in a little bit. But on that, Walter, always good to see you. Hopefully I can make it down to your event this year. And
come on. You're always welcome.
We got to schedule the date first. I'm just kidding. It's probably on your website already, right?
Probably.
What was it? So you do a quarterly event in Jackson, Mississippi. You do the IRA event, small dollar IRA, the land trust, and what were the other 2 events that you do, just in case they're?
There's 2. There's a new one that I've never done before. It's negotiating, and it's learning how to exercise that negotiation muscle daily, and that's the highest paid work that there is. And it really pays off when you can negotiate in real estate or mortgages. So that'll be one. Steve Zahala's going to help me do that. And then we'll have a short-term rental event for those that are interested in learning about it or those that are already in it, want to sharpen their tools. I work on that every day, and it's a good business. It's a good cash flow business to learn. Matter of fact, it's that one business alone is enough if you got enough of them and know how to operate the business.
I mean, you turned part of your house there into an Airbnb, just an exterior overhead unit, right?
Yeah, and we got somebody up there right now. They're probably hearing me. No, but now the funny thing about it is, so we bought this house a couple of years ago in the same neighborhood. We didn't want to leave the neighborhood. My wife's father passed away and left a bunch of old furniture. Some people call them antiques, right? So my wife, after we got all the furniture back to Mississippi from Florida, she says, our house is too small. So we had to go buy a new house for the furniture she inherited. Big mistake. But what I did like about it was it had an exterior entrance office with a half bath upstairs, no connectivity to the downstairs. And so we spent $7,000 tricking that place out with a kitchen and a shower, and it brings in enough money, almost enough money to pay for my entire house. Now, that's pretty cool, isn't it?
I mean, you've been doing Airbnb for a while. Have you seen any changes lately? Are you seeing
Every day you change. I'll tell you one thing that I've seen, that there's a lot more fraudsters out there. People have learned how to work the system.
As far as the potential tenants renting your property or coming to stay in your property, not so much the actual investors doing Airbnb, you mean?
No, here's the thing. So the guests that come, some of them have had a good experience at getting the host to waive all fees with some type of extortion attempt. You know, the reviews are important to both parties. And so we had somebody last year that a new house, as soon as they checked in, they took a picture of a roach and said, "I want a full refund." That house has never had any roaches. Not one have we ever seen one in that house. So he brought it. And so now that's what I'm saying. There's changing how to deal with people that are there just to extort you out of. That's the reason they came. And there's a lot more of that. So you need to be aware of it. The mom and pops, they get burned all the time by that.
That's happening a lot more. It's happened to a lot of my other friends that do Airbnb. You can do a cross review of the individuals staying in the properties as well, though. So you should be. Is that correct? You can, because I don't do Airbnb.
You can, but you know, they just change a family member and go do it with somebody that doesn't have a review. Something else that has been happening that I don't think it's just our world, but if you leave it on instant booking, that means they could actually book after you're gone to sleep, and they could get access through the automation. And there's been a ring of drug dealing activities that they rent that for 2 nights, 3 nights, and they come in and so it's not a business for the faint at heart, but it is a good cash flow business.
I mean, there's nowhere on there that you guys can leave a review, like say, because this has happened. What you just said has happened to like a lot of people I've talked to lately. I guess there used to be like a website like beatthelandlord.com where it's just a bunch of sketchy tenants out there trying to figure out how to escape the system and not have to pay rent. So there's got to be a way for you guys to all, like, let's say someone did that, put a review up there so that before you get to choose that you can rent to someone or not, right? They don't just automatically get a booking if it's open. You can refuse.
Well, yeah, you need to put in your systems for that. And so you say it changes every day. There's more automation and technology available for that. We've found though that there's a trend that people think, that the reason they rent Airbnbs is because they're cheaper than hotels. And we had one that gave us a less than perfect review last week, and she said, "Well, the reason I chose this is because I wanted to cook." And she was comparing my place that she paid $110 a night for a 3-bedroom to one 5-star hotel in our neighborhood that's $300 a night. And she said, so somehow in her mind, these should be the same. And that's been a trend, that people want the Marriott experience, but they want to pay the Motel 6 fee.
It's crazy out there, Walter. What do you guys
So
say?
I'm not trying to be down on it. I'm just saying it's a whole new business. You got to learn. You're into people business, hosting.
It's not, yeah. So it's not so much investing; it's an actual business. Now, if you own the property, it's a combination of investing and running a business. But a lot of people are doing master leases. Some people are just managing other people's properties, and they don't even go into a master lease. They're just handling the cleaning and the management of it, like a property management company.
30% of gross.
Are you guys doing that, or you're?
No, I'm not. But I know others that do that they're making more money managing than they are owning them.
Well, I know your boys run one of the top property management companies, if not the biggest property management company in Jackson. Have they looked into doing that, or are they doing anything on a large scale?
There's only one person in town, a broker that's doing that I know of.
Seems like a headache to me.
It's just, well, now think about this. If you got 30% of gross, and so you got one property, $3,000 a month, you're getting $1,000. Is that better than managing 10 houses at $100 a month?
Well, probably
Yeah.
it's okay if like, I mean, what do you think some of the biggest mistakes that they're making? Because like, if you have all your properties scattered out all across a big metro area, it's a nightmare. But if you keep them close knit in a pocket where you can send your, or what are some of the headaches that you've been running into that you've had to overcome that you can kind of?
Yeah, you got the cleaning crew is critical, that they do a good job and have checks and balances to follow through, make sure they do that. Because that's where you can get off track very quickly, is too many bad reviews. And Airbnb will kick you off the system for a while.
Right.
You're out.
I knew a guy that was making like over $10,000 net off a property outside Manhattan. And there was one bad review. Someone, as is, the cleaners forgot to clean up and they found like a used condom in there, and literally overnight it killed. He had to sell the property. And then I've known some other ones where they had laws change. And so we talked a bit, I think we talked about some of the other podcasts. So I think it's a great business model. I know a lot of people doing well. Just make sure it cash flows normally if you do have to somehow make that payment, that so you're not going backwards. Because people are buying these, because some of these properties, I know people making $2,000-$3,000 a month off a property in some markets.
Yeah. How about that? Well, Connor, thank you.
Yep. Appreciate you. All right, guys, we'll put his links to his website below. Go check him out. And that, Walter, always good to see you.